Coming up on Oily Trash Movies.
Grenade necklaces.
Designer weapons.
I won't be making it weird on the podcast. I'll try to think. See, that's my tip. What I just said was unedited.
All right, and we're live. Hello, and welcome to Oily Trash Movies. This is the only podcast where two people watch bad movies and say unfunny things the entire time. I'm your host, Daddy WarBux, and with me, I have a very special guest co-host today. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm hudgepudge, and huge fan of the podcast. And yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, Hudge is a huge fan and a friend of the podcast. You may have heard us give him a shout out now and again throughout the episodes. Today, we're going to be watching a really great movie. Hudge brought this up. He says he wants to see it. It looks pretty cool. It's called The Holy Mountain. I can't wait to get into this. Last bonus episode, we watched Destroy All Neighbors with Stu from the Stu World Order. I was recently on his podcast. We reviewed Conan the Barbarian. Make sure to check that out. This week, me and Hudge, we're going to be watching Holy Mountain. Now, Hudge, this is a movie you brought to me. You seem to be a fan of this. What can you tell us about this to sort of prime me and the audience for what exactly we're getting into?
First of all, it's a movie that in the first 10 minutes, it's like no other movie I've ever watched. A very close friend of mine introduced it to me, who has kind of just shown me a couple different, like, really interesting things, and I don't know where he heard it from, but I have only seen this movie twice, but I was on acid both times, so the plot is not clear to me in memory.
All right, and I honestly don't know how much of the plot we're going to be able to get out of this, because I believe this is a Mexican movie, and I don't have any subtitles for it. I don't even know if there's dialogue. My understanding is that there's very little dialogue in this movie, but it certainly seems interesting from the clips I've seen. I would call it, you use the word surreal. This is probably an art house movie, a little bit different than what we normally do in Oily Trash Movies. On IMDb here, it's categorized as an adventure drama fantasy film, and the synopsis goes as, in a corrupt, greed-fueled world, a powerful alchemist leads a messianic character and 7 materialistic figures to the Holy Mountain, where they hope to achieve enlightenment.
I would like to say that animals were most certainly or most probably harmed during the making of this film, or killed, and so that is, I think, something that has made me very careful about recommending it or saying it's like I love the movie or something like that. It's a very interesting piece of art that, as far as like if I had to pick one to watch and talk about, it's definitely a good pick.
Sure, this is definitely something that our viewers should be made aware of, especially if you're interested in seeing this movie yourself. We will not be showing any of those scenes on YouTube, obviously, for many, many reasons. This is a film that is 51 years old, and obviously today we have a much higher standard of ethics in filmmaking, and especially working with animals in any sort of industry. So something to bear in mind, that this is somewhat a product of its time. So if you are sensitive to animal violence, I guess I haven't seen this yet. I don't know how extreme it is. I'm probably going to be turning my head away because I do not like violence towards animals. I'm a big fan of animals. So hopefully it's not too bad. I was browsing the Wikipedia and it said there were like carcasses. So like maybe hopefully these animals aren't actually being killed on screen. I'll be very upset if that's the case, but definitely something to keep in mind if you're sensitive towards that sort of thing. Do we have anything else to say before we hop into this?
As far as like kind of factoring that in, I mean, I think I would try to say what I would rate it with or without that as well at the end. I mean, I really think it's valid to say that art is, it's really, I don't want to promote a movie that does this or really enable that at all. But I think that, it'll be worth trying to look at the piece of art independently of this as well, and just try to have that idea.
Sure, this is a study of a piece of art from 1973. This is certainly not a promotion of anything horrible that might happen in the film or might have happened in the production of the film. So we're keeping that in mind, and that goes for all the movies we watch. So I'm ready to get into this. And 3, 2, 1, let's go. I gotta say, being that this is about a messianic character with 7 materialistic figures that presumably he's traveling with, I'm wondering if these 7 characters are representative of the 7 deadly sins. Ugh.
I must say, the 70s were a different place. I know this is not the United States, but the world's changed a lot in terms of what's acceptable to release as a movie.
I'm assuming this is our Jesus character here.
I mean, I'm so glad to be watching this with you right now because I really do want to hear your commentary on this.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the kind of movie that Hudgepudge is a fan of, you know? That's a pretty cool effect.
Where do you think you have any ideas on, as far as a period piece, right? Type of thing, since it was made in 1971. Do you think there is anything about that sticks out to you?
Well, is this supposed to be taking place in modern times when this was created in the 70s, or is this supposed to be like the future from 1973? You know what? I have no idea. This is pretty bizarre.
I think it's supposed to be out of time, really. I think it's supposed to be sort of elements from all sorts of time.
Christ's for sale. That was pretty funny. I guess this is just like latex. So that's actually what they use when they make latex masks of people in movies. Is they put those rubber tubes in your nose so you don't suffocate.
So they're trying to copy Jesus?
Oh, they made the mold of them so that they could build statues to sell. I think that's a brilliant take on the consumerist side of religious memorabilia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
I wonder why you took one and at the end is destroying them all.
Well, I'm thinking, like, what's the contrast between what a man actually is and what he's perceived by the world to be? Because especially with Jesus, everybody, when you think of Jesus, you think of the guy nailed on the cross. But then here we also see the real person that image is based off of.
Yeah, I think it takes a pretty strong but interesting interpretation of what exactly the perspective of Jesus would look like.
Oh my god, this is like the Tower of Babel. Excellently choreographed action scene here. Ah, what the Jesus?
Absolutely unnecessary.
God.
To symbolize what exactly? What are we symbolizing here?
That Jesus had an asshole.
Like everyone else. Can I just say, for anybody interested in watching this movie, it's a lot. It's an intense movie.
Man, I bet Bubba would have actually loved this, to be honest. I know, this is cool imagery.
Do you know anything about tarot?
I know nothing about tarot. Are these actual tarot images?
This is, I think, not any standard tarot I've ever seen. I feel like I'm going to be a totally different person by the end of this movie. I don't even...
Yeah, I'm not sure. So the first guy here is a businessman who specializes in cosmetics, so I'm wondering if this is perhaps vanity? If these 7 individuals do represent sins?
He puts his hand into her sex. If it's moist, it's yes. If it's dry, it's no.
Okay, so yeah, this looks like vanity, I would say.
Yeah, a superficial, fake vanity.
Alright, this is pretty cool. We got some rock accompaniments.
Grenade necklaces.
Designer weapons.
And roll weapons. Mystical weapons for Buddhists. Jews. And Christians.
Alright, this is growing on me. I'm liking the sort of vignettes with each of these 7 characters way more than the Jesus getting his asshole scrubbed.
Yeah, I guess when you're king, you can just invent new ways to make giant dildos.
You gotta warm it up first, come on.
Going through some testing.
It's a little baby robot. Okay, this is fucking bizarre. What in the hell?
So of all the vignettes, these guys are the shittiest and absolute, they're a dumpster fire compared to everyone else running companies and managing governments.
Yeah.
She's just taking a piss in the sink.
Let he among us cast the first stone on that one.
Begin the operations of the gas chambers, gas schools, gas universities, gas libraries, gas museums, gas dance halls, and gas whorehouses, etc.
This movie's funny, It's weirdly funny.
It is. It has a good sense of humor. Well, it's such a tonal shift from the first act, where it was all just misery. Wait, I think this might be gluttony, because this is like all food products. I guess it's not all food products, but... dude, I don't fucking know. This is nonsense.
I think they're just trying to symbolize... like, what you could get out of people, just sort of exploiting them for what they have of value.
Yeah, we're all unique and full of, like, unique, original ideas and substance.
Right. As far as combining intensity and depth with control and power, you have the idea of taking out what is making them unique.
And they're also being killed for it, so it's almost like they're stripping away the humanity and what makes people individuals and killing the ones who are different.
He said he was an architect. I wonder if they're going to tie that into anything more.
Well, he's designing low-cost housing. Oh, look! Coffins. This is almost like that whole concept of, like, living in pods.
Pluto's also a symbol of deep transformation, and I think insofar as he's selling people these things, what he's selling them is also going to, like, deeply change them, is what it seems like.
Oh, she loves it.
You will live in the coffin. You will be happy.
And then you die in the coffin and they just bury it.
Incredibly efficient.
I guess we're in modern times now. Okay.
20 minutes ago, we were on Mars talking to a weapons manufacturer, so I'm not sure when we are exactly. So I guess we moved on from each individual vignette sort of style of the symbols.
Yeah, it seems like we're now moving into the third act where we're introduced to this concept of the Holy Mountain, which is, I suspect, their quest now?
It's a quest for immortality.
Oh, another Hudge reference here in this scene. Alright, I feel like burning money is a pretty foolish use of your money.
If you want to be enlightened, just give me all your money. Okay? Trust me, bro.
Yeah, I think I'll live in the dark and have all my WarBux. I was just about to say, I think I'd keep one of those bands of hundreds.
Yeah, it looks like they're not too enthusiastic about the process. I see they're reusing the molds being the representation of ourselves.
Great callback to the first act.
All right, step 1, all material possessions and wealth. Step 2, the concept even of yourself. Waiting to see how this would really improve my life, though. It's interesting that of the party, the Jesus figure is somewhat foolish and problematic, or he's the one who didn't want to give his money.
Well, he really wasn't established that well. There was the one line where, when they're being introduced to the other 7, the guy in white says, "Like you, they're thieves." So perhaps he was a convicted thief and was sort of being sentenced to death because he was on a cross at one point being stoned.
Right, I don't even know if really he's supposed to be Jesus at all, or...
Well, he's not Jesus, but he is supposed to be Christ-like, because that scene that we just watched, the guy said, "Oh, you want to be like Christ? Here's what would happen," and it showed the multiplying loaves of bread, so... very specifically not Christ. What? They pulled his little armless friend out from inside of him? What? What?
I wonder if this is for the purpose of continuing to remove deeper attachments. I'm interested to see how long they're going to continue the theme of detachment as a process.
Oh my, it is Lotus Island.
Another effect of the lotus flower is that it makes you forget. And I think that thematically makes sense as far as you can gain maybe some enlightenment and realizations that you forget in the sense of temptations of the world and material attachments that you can regain.
Rub your clitoris against the mountain!
Oh, she's doing it. She's fucking the mountain.
Any thoughts on that?
Kind of hot, I guess.
All right, it's starting to make sense now, right? It's the, having to have sex with a mountain, having to cut off your hand. I mean, these are sort of things that most people wouldn't want to do.
I mean, I feel like having sex with a mountain isn't necessarily a bad thing. She seemed like she enjoyed it.
I mean, yeah, she definitely seemed happy to do that.
I'd rather be the one who had sex with the mountain than the one who cut off his fingers. See, they're all being distracted by some sort of lust. Oh, God, I don't want to, what?
I mean, I think it is trying to symbolize very abusive, not good things. It's not romanticizing, I think,
Jeez.
these things.
She's lusting after lovers whose genitals were the size of horses and whose emissions were that of donkeys.
Don't judge, okay?
Gee, this is exhausting.
I am exhausted. Did you say you knew somebody who also was reviewing this movie on YouTube?
We're the only people. This is the only podcast that's ever watched and reviewed Holy Mountain.
And we came to life. But is this life reality? No. It is a film. Zumba camera.
Oh my God, we're breaking the fourth wall now?
It's thematically congruent as far as deconstructing to the next level.
Their mission was they were characters in a movie and they got there and they broke out of the movie. Is this the end?
This might be the end, yeah.
Hudgepudge.
Well. What do you think?
Okay, so this was The Holy Mountain. This is very much an artistic film, I would say. I think, however, even saying that, despite a fact that a lot of the scenes are just imagery, especially in the beginning, and I would say the second or the third act, we sort of regress to that. The strongest part for me was definitely the second act. Going through all of those characters' backstories was really interesting. I enjoyed the visuals. I enjoyed sort of like guessing and trying to interpret what I was seeing. I don't know if I had much success. This is very much an obtuse film as well. I don't know what I'm supposed to take away from it, which doesn't necessarily, it's not a strike against the movie, but that's definitely something to be aware of. If you are not a fan of movies that make little sense or force you to think for yourself, you're definitely not going to like this. Even my taste, this is pretty far out there. I don't think I regret watching it. It was certainly beautiful in a lot of ways. The one question you had for me is, would I watch this again? And I'm going to say no. Part of it is that a lot of it is too grotesque for me. Some of the scenes were really vile. Some of the very explicit male nudity was offensive. Even some of the female nudity, it didn't even come across artistic. These were just, well, I guess it's artistic, but it would certainly be off-putting.
As far as it being psychologically disturbing and whether or not that's over the top or in line is, I think, hard for me to say, because it clearly has intense satire embedded throughout, as well as extreme imagery. So I really wanted to sort of pick your brain about whether you think that the disturbing parts of it are congruent or are done in a inappropriate way. I mean, is it a congruent piece of art, or is it just a disturbing but cohesive piece?
I would say it's congruent. I do think, however, that a lot of the disturbing imagery is a huge turnoff for a general audience, and even a huge turnoff for a host of a podcast that reviews strange and sometimes, or oftentimes, bad movies.
When I was thinking about what movie to give you, I thought, what is the most psychological, disturbing movie I can choose, right? Because you'll you'll have to watch the whole thing. I'll be there. We'll suffer together, and that's funny to me. So I might have bit off a little more than I could chew. I feel exhausted after watching this movie. I did actually enjoy it and get more out of it than I ever have the previous times. I made no sense of it. Absolutely none at all. I think it was unpleasant, but there were many small, short scenes that had very striking impressions on me, and they were very creative, really, with a lot of the symbolism that they wove together. I think that when you have a hodgepodge of different periods and different symbols, it can come across as sometimes cliche, or just sort of sprinkling in these things to add a flavor in a sort of tactless way. But I think that there's a lot of original stuff going on.
Oh, absolutely. This is, especially the second act across the 7 backstories, there is so much creativity and so much out of the box thinking that I'm really not used to in a lot of films. And really, I think juxtaposing all of the vileness with these very artistic sequences actually makes the gore and the off-putting parts somehow more impactful, because when you're watching a horror movie and it's just grisly and gory and blood and guts the whole way through, you're sort of desensitized to it. It sort of ceases to mean anything. But when you watch a 10-minute sequence of people in a factory or climbing a mountain, and then suddenly you've got some sort of horrific act, or some sort of explicit sexuality or horrible violence, or what's I think very convincing gore in some cases, it makes it so much more impactful in ways that you wouldn't expect.
A pretty interesting analogy. Let me know what you think. If you know Pixar shorts, right? The animated.
Yes.
I think that they can often evoke such strong emotions without really much dialogue at all, and it's amazing how they can do this just through really like these tiny little expressions, and kind of indirectly painting a picture to evoke really emotions. And I think that, and it kind of ties into the question I wanted to ask you as to whether you think that they achieved what they were setting out to achieve in this film. It is a very ambitious film, but as far as achieving what I think they set out to do, I actually think that they did a really good job. There's a lot of personal, very affecting scenes that I think complement the journey of the characters. And I think that you are supposed to be one of those characters. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you definitely hit the nail on the head when you call this ambitious. This is an extraordinarily ambitious movie. It's almost unbelievable that this was made in the 70s. I can't imagine what this costs with all the sets from all the different planets. It feels like this was something that would be much more successful as a book, or just the screenplay, because you could really delve into a lot of this stuff. But seeing it all brought to life was pretty impressive. As for whether or not this movie succeeded, I think that this is pretty. This is art for art's sake. I would almost say this is. It feels like a very purely artistic creation, and I think if you set out to make art, and it's almost like the journey that these people went through. If you can avoid becoming consumerist, if you can avoid selling out to greed and you just want all those gold coins that are raining upon you, if you can avoid maybe filling it with just beautiful naked women. The women we saw a lot of times weren't necessarily beautiful, or when they were naked, even if they were beautiful, it was never sexualized too much, outside of the scenes that were very explicit sexually. But I think that if you can avoid all of those sins of filmmaking in a quest to make art, because I think the director here was on a quest himself, and I would say yes, he did achieve what he set out to do, which was making a pure work of art, which avoided the pitfalls that so many, especially modern films, so many films set out to try to do something, but because there's a studio backing them, because they're expected to have an ROI, a lot of that gets sacrificed. Nothing was sacrificed in this movie, from what I got from it. So yes, I would say that this is a successful endeavor as far as artistic creation goes.
Are you familiar with Andy Kaufman?
I love Andy
I
Kaufman.
love him so much. He's a hero and role model to me, and I'm very serious, right? And a huge inspiration. And I think it might be I'm not sure how much of an analogy it makes sense, but he's one of those kind of artists who a lot of the times you could see artists sort of be true to themselves, and then at some point they fall in line with the machinations of making money, having comfort. I mean, every movie that anybody sees these days is just about making money. Even independent films, there's to make a profit. This film seems like it was so expensive, and there were so many decisions in it that made it unable to be integrated into mainstream culture, and they knew that, right? So in that way, I have to respect that they are, I think, actually doing this with pure artistic intentions and not trying to make money, despite how much production value is going in here. And it's a very mixed, confusing feeling for me to evaluate it because of the animal abuse and ethics that are also displayed by the people who made it. I mean, they are people who, if done slightly differently, I would actually really admire, but I absolutely can't. And I'm just, this movie is in a very limbo state and has been for ever since I've seen it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you when you say that this was not something that was made to have any sort of mass appeal. And in fact, it does seem like some of the decisions were intentional in that this is going to turn off a general audience. I wouldn't recommend this to anybody other than Bubblegum Barbie or someone that I know that it's really into artsy fartsy type movies, because that's what this is. And even if you are into that, this is still a very difficult watch. Just for some of the imagery is tough to look at. The animal cruelty. There was the scene where the cows were having sex. Like that was like I had to look away from that. There were a few parts
I looked
where
away several times during the movie without any problem or sort of
no self-consciousness.
there's times when you sort of are spooked by a scary movie and you feel like you're being a baby. And this movie is one of those movies where you can comfortably feel like you can turn it off and walk away, and you won't really feel like coming back and watching it ever.
I was gagging at a couple of the scenes. Not too many. I definitely didn't like when the guy popped out his glass eye and there was just a hole in this dude's face. I think that was a real person who was missing an eye.
That scene made no sense. I thought it was some sort of, okay, there's prostitutes around. This is clearly a minor, an old man. It's what is going to go on? It looks pretty sussy. Then he takes out his eyeball and gives it to her, and then sort of, holds her hand, and, there's some sort of symbolic thing going on. But it again, there's so many scenes that make no sense. I am able to make out a lot of, I think, the symbolism to some degree, and upon watching again and again, I probably could figure out more again, though I have no interest in doing that.
All right, so what would you change about this movie if you were going back in time and on the production set?
The animal violence, it's like they just didn't need to do that. I mean, I don't know the industry at the time or anything really, but it's just totally inappropriate. As far as factoring that in to how people receive things, I think that it matters, right? I think that if you really want to create art and have people, really try to understand what you're saying, you're really that is such a huge thing that it's like you have to do it either intentionally, and that's part of it, or not do that, because it's a totally different movie without it, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's hard to sort of restructure an art house film. Obviously, I'm a very traditional writer. I really respect and appreciate the 3-act structure, which even this did have a 3-act structure, I would say. Especially the first act, I felt that there was a lot of scenes maybe we could have done without, or perhaps we could actually start where we're assembling this group and maybe intersperse the backstories through the quest to keep the flow going, because I really did feel like this dragged at the beginning and the end, and that made it difficult to get through. So maybe a little bit of restructuring. I mean, and then, obviously nowadays anything with the animals would be CGI, and you really wouldn't even have that concern in a modern movie. I don't know. There's a lot to think about.
Well, if I were to, here's the thing. I would rather, I mean, I'm not going to go ahead and do the work to do this, but if I could give somebody like an edited version of this movie where I just can go through and pick out some of these scenes, that would, I think, you really wouldn't lose a lot, even though those scenes are relevant. You wouldn't lose a lot, and I think, it's one of those things where I talked about, watching this with you, with my wife, and she, had said, "Oh, well, we can, watch it together at, some later time," and I'm like, absolutely, I've got no interest in that. But she was saying, with skipping those scenes, right? And it's like, first of all, these scenes are just popping up all the time. I have to basically watch it all over again myself just to know. It's like, honey, I didn't watch this movie because I love it. I watched this movie because I wanted to break Rob's balls.
Removing some of these scenes, I think that in the editing bay, you could put together a cut of this movie that is way, way more palatable. Now, the director probably, I think, very much intentionally wants to create feelings of discomfort in the viewer, so he would probably oppose that. But I think
he's an animal abuser, and I don't care what he thinks. That's the thing. I don't have any problem. I don't promote piracy, but I do not support this person, and I do not really. I don't care what they think.
Okay, fair. Okay, so saying that, what do you rate this movie?
I've been thinking about that for a while. I would give it 5 eyeballs.
Okay, 5 eyeballs. I think 5 eyeballs is actually very fitting. There is a lot of eyeball imagery in this movie, all the way down to where the guy pulls his eye out. And being that you're a giant floating disembodied eyeball, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I'm going to be a little bit less favorable. Well, I wouldn't call this oily necessarily, but I think it is probably the majority of it is an unpleasant experience. So I'm going to give this 2 WarBux. I did really love some of the bright, vibrant imagery that we had in the second act. And I love things that are colorful. I love things like the tarot card scenes, and they were spinning. That was gorgeous. Some of the overhead shots where the floor or the set, or maybe it was just the camera spinning in some of them to create an effect like it was rotating. I loved all of that. That was fantastic. I loved the sequence where everybody was being shot and disemboweled, but they were just pulling Christmas ornaments and chickens and just random stuff out of these people's bodies. That was all super cool and creative. So, maybe 2.5 WarBux to 3 WarBux. I didn't really enjoy myself too much, but there was a lot in this movie that I loved. So that's where I'll leave that. Do we have anything else to say?
I do want to say, I do recommend this movie. A lot of people like to be disturbed, right? That's what they're looking for, right? And I'm not really one of those people, but a lot of people pick a lot of different sort of psychological horror movies and things like that. But this movie really makes me feel things in a more disturbing, fucked up way that it's very hard to describe. And I wouldn't say I get anything out of it insofar as I'm a better person or anything like that. But as far as if you're looking for that, if you're looking to really watch a movie that psychologically is disturbing, it's a great. I would it would be the first on my list.
Yeah, I think people who love horror movies would actually be more offended by this than most contemporary horror films. You know who I would recommend this to? I guess the last thing I would say, I would recommend this to anybody who watched and enjoyed Wigwoof's Wizard of Oz. That's another bonus episode we did. Check that out. Check out The Wizard of Oz. This is very similar in vibes where, yeah, it's like artistic imagery juxtaposed with weird, gruesome stuff. And that's a unique experience. There's not a lot of films like that. So that is a point in favor to the movie. Whether or not people are going to enjoy that is a completely separate issue, which I think probably most people are going to dislike this. But I'm glad I saw this. I'm glad I got to see this with you, Hudge. I want to thank you so much. One, for being a fan and supporting Oily Trash Movies. And two, for coming on here and doing this episode. It was great to have you. I would welcome you back any other time. Maybe we can do another weird, bonkers type movie like this, or maybe we could do something a little bit more traditional next time.
The next one, I'm going to make sure the next one I actually enjoy, because this one is sort of like, I hurt you, and that makes me, you're a longtime buddy who, we like to rib each other a bit. So this was a sort of joint suffering, fun thing. I do want to say, as a last thing, thank you for having me on, of course, and I really appreciated your opinion of this movie, because I really could not make head nor tail of it. I mean, I think that you did a good job of breaking it down as a movie, right? It's not, all movies have a formula, a structure to some degree, and can be evaluated according to standards that, if you are very into reviewing movies and what all that looks like, then it starts to make more sense. And so, yeah, thanks. I mean, oh man, I'm just struggling. I gotta go take a nap, I think.
This whole thing was a ploy to get me to explain this movie to you, because you were so confused when you saw it. So fantastic. I think that's all we have to say. Thanks again, and take care, comb your hair.